Authors Press.
Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org, for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have J. Barbara Alvord. We'll be discussing her book, Through Different Eyes, An Immigrant's Heroic Journey, 1889 to 1909. Available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And just so you guys are aware, Barbara was brought to People of Distinction today by some of the best movers in the business. Authors Press Publishing. If you have a book that you'd like moved, move it through Authors Press. You can find them at authorspress.com. And guys, I'm so excited to have Barbara here on the line with us because, listen, the book that we're going to be discussing, Through Different Eyes, is going to be looking at one immigrant's journey through different eyes, right? Through Barbara's eyes. And what is so great about this narrative is, of course, we're going to be discussing her grandmother's journey here to the United States. But what's amazing about it, and really what is so applicable to all of our own individual journeys, is, really the quote that continues to ring in my mind as I was doing the research on the book, and that I'm sure it's going to ring in your mind as well, is in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been. And I think that is so amazing. That is so beautiful when we take the time to really analyze our past and analyze our family's journeys and really why they've decided to embark upon the journeys that they did and how we've gotten to where we are today. And listen, Barbara is going to be able to explain all of this. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Let's bring her here on the line with us. Barbara, first and foremost, thank you so much for being a guest with us on People of Distinction. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic. Listen, we are so looking forward to this. Now, before we jump into the book, let's hold off slightly, okay? Tell our listening audience a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about myself. Well, I've worked at all kinds of things. As a matter of fact, when I was in high school, my last senior year, in the summertime, I worked at a sewing machine factory. And I decided at that time I was never going to do it again. And it was hot. We didn't have air conditioning, all that garbage. And right after that, I went in as a secretary to the same company. So I've done a lot of things. I even went and worked for the FBI for a couple of years.
Wow.
After I got out of school. Yeah. And my husband and I owned a jewelry store for a while, and I decided I didn't really like to do that either. I didn't go to college till I was 29, and I have a master's in school administration. So I did that for quite a while, and then I left it and was a stockbroker for a while and certified financial planner. But through all of that, I really was writing a lot. I was at writing groups, and I mentioned to Benji that when I was in grade school, I wrote an article about my grandmother entitled Little Bohemian Girl. So I started at early time. Anything else you like?
That is absolutely incredible, Barbara. I mean, you've worn many hats.
I have. I have indeed, and I retired from the Principal Financial Group as an officer, and that's about the time I started the book. And I'd been writing on it for a while, but I really wanted to get this down for not only for my son and my grandson, but for me.
Absolutely.
And I've often felt, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I've been reasonably successful in America, but how did I get here? I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Anna. I wouldn't.
Absolutely.
So that's where I'm at on that.
And that is such a great segue into the book. And I think that's so beautiful. Really, just that one question: how did I get here? And I think that
Right.
that is something that we all can relate to, right? In our human family, I think a lot of times, just speaking from my own experience, I don't take enough time to stop and analyze, because of course, listen, here in America, and well, I guess prior to this coronavirus pandemic really kind of putting everybody, in their homes, prior to that, it was
Right.
just we were all on that hamster wheel, just constantly moving from one thing to the next. And
Right.
it was one of those things where I didn't ever really stop and think enough about, listen, how did I get here? Right? My family,
Yeah, really.
my family
Really.
being from another
I
country.
found it fascinating all the way through. I really did.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. And again, this is definitely something that, everybody can relate to. And if you haven't thought about that yet, after we discuss this book, I'm sure you're really going to open a lot of people's eyes and really put that
I hope
question in their
so.
mind. So, Barbara, let's
Yeah.
let's jump right in. Through Different Eyes: An Immigrant's Heroic Journey, 1889 to 1909. Tell us about the title. How did you come up with that creatively, and why did you decide to name your narrative that?
Well, it goes back to an actual experience I had when I was very young. I lived in Waterloo with my parents, and of course, Anna at that time and her husband were both near Czech Village in Cedar Rapids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and visited her a lot. In fact, that was the day; those were the days when you could put a kid on a bus and tell the bus driver to watch over her, and you could do it. And anyway, I was sitting on her lap one day, and I was really little. I remember it, but I had to have been not old at all, like maybe 5 or something like that. And I was stroking her cheek, and I noticed that her eyes were a slightly different color. They won't. They both weren't the very same color. One was a very light brown, and the other one was hazel a little bit. I don't think most people would have noticed it, but I did because I was really close to her.
Wow.
And it's always been in my memory. And then, as I began to write the book, the metaphor comes in because that's me. It's through my different eyes because I just took everything for granted when I was growing up. You know, she came over and everything. And I was always interested in it, but um, I realized as I start to write it, as I began to write it, that it also covers my eyes. That I
Mm-hmm.
see her differently since I have done this. So I'm seeing her story through different eyes than I had when I was younger, and she really did have different colored eyes. So that's it.
Beautiful. That is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, the next question, I mean, listen, let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the book is, and as I say, I wanted to walk in her shoes, and I thought about it a lot. Um, I felt that I needed to know what was going on in the world and where she was to know what she was having to deal with all the way through her life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up in different a different context. Part one is the peasant life, so I went through that and how awful those people had to put up with in Europe, particularly. The second was the long trek west when she was chosen by her parents to go with her godfather from Bohemia to Iowa. As a matter of fact, she didn't have anything to say about it, but she was only 14 at that time. And then the third one is in America, what happened when she got to America. And she had a really kind of bad series the first place that she stayed because she was meeting Joe's family on the way over here, and she was they lived with or they stayed with his daughter for a bit in the Lower East Side of New York City, and then she met another woman and she was very helpful. But when she got to Iowa, that all changed. And so she had to live through that for a few years and came out of it fine, but a really tough few years then.
Now,
so that's how it organized in my mind, okay?
Now, Barbara, let's go into the inspiration. Okay, now inspiration in itself, of course, can take many forms. But A, what inspired you to write this particular book? And I know we've already started to go into it in terms of you really wanted to know her journey. But also, this is not the only thing that you've written, right? I mean, you talked about how when you were in elementary school, you had written, a story that way. So it sounds like writing has always been something you've been very passionate about.
Yes, it has been.
So talk
to us. It really has.
Talk to us about
and
your
I
inspiration.
And I had encouragement from a junior high teacher at one point. But in my era, I was born in the middle of a depression, terrible depression. My father was a blue collar worker, and he was out of work for two years and just doing odd jobs. And so anyway, I now I look around at my living and where I lived and how I lived. I have a lot of artwork. I got my degrees, but I do think I just have thought a lot. How did I get here? I wouldn't be here like this if Grandma had not gone through everything that she did to get here. I wouldn't.
Here on the line with J. Barbara Alvord, we're discussing her book Through Different Eyes: An Immigrant's Heroic Journey, 1889 to 1909. Available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Now, Barbara, listen, we know about the title. We know about the book. We know what inspired you. Now, I think you've already started to go briefly into this, but why did you feel that this was a book that needed to be written? It wasn't just a story that was passed down from generations to generation within your family, but something that you really wanted to put out for the public to benefit from as well.
Yes. Well, I have a son. I have one son and one grandson. And I feel very strongly, I've always felt really strongly, that they need to know where they came from and from whom they came. And so obviously, I mean, I'm not a young chicken at all, and I'm not going to be around that much longer. But my son will have that book, and he has it, and I showed him the picture, the new picture with him and my grandson and me in it, with little Anna smiling at those three. And he just kept saying, "She's watching us. She's watching us."
Wow.
I just thought that was so neat, And so it is for my family, but it is also a metaphor for what everybody has had to go through with an immigrant family in their background.
A concept that is so relatable. And really, as I started the interview off, right, you can't know where you're going unless you know where you've come from, right? And I think that
absolutely
that's such an old adage, and it sounds like such a cliche, but it really is. It rings true in every aspect. And I think that is so beautiful, right? Because when you really stop and you analyze it, listen, unfortunately, not everybody gets to be written about in the history books. So you really want to make sure that you're leaving behind this legacy so that future generations can know where they've come from and where their family migrated from and why they've made some of the decisions that they've made. And listen, I think that this is absolutely beautiful, the journey that you decided to embark upon. So wonderful, wonderful. And Barbara, listen, as we tie up this book, because of course we have some other things that we want to quickly touch up on as well. So I want to leave a little bit of time for that as well. But as we tie up this book, there are so many messages that can be pulled from the narrative. And there are so many messages that we can pull just from this interview alone. But if there's one central theme, one central message that you really want to make sure that it's very concise, very direct, that our listening audience here at People of Distinction knows about your book, what would that message be?
Don't overlook what you've received from your family. Really, that's really
Mm-hmm.
what it comes down to. We have parents, we have grandparents, and it's awfully easy to say, "Well, boy, I really made something out of my life." But you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be doing what you're doing if it hadn't been for the turmoil that people went through to leave their country and their family, and not knowing the language. She struggled with that all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and was without her family and her mother when she ended up on this farm with all the problems with the woman who was in charge. And it was really terrible. I'm amazed she survived it. I don't know that I would have. When I was 14, I couldn't find my way out of a room practically. So she did a very good job.
Absolutely. It's funny how we look back and analyze some of the things that our families had to go through, and it really, at least in my experience, I look back at my family's journey, and I look at my current situation, and I'm like, I really can't complain, right? Because some of the things that they had to
Right.
go through, I don't know how I would be able to make it through. And it just shows the amount of strength that they needed to possess to overcome some of the adversity that they were facing is absolutely remarkable.
Well, one part of the thing that could enable her to do this was that she was the only child in that family,
Hmm.
and they lived in one room with a
Wow.
dirt floor. She was the oldest child, and every time a child came on, then she was in charge with the ones that were younger.
Absolutely.
So she started really early, having a lot of responsibility.
That is
She did.
that is so incredible. Barbara, this has been wonderful. Guys, once again, here on the line with J. Barbara Alvord. We just finished discussing her book, Through Different Eyes, An Immigrant's Heroic Journey, 1889 to 1909, available in Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Now, Barbara, that's not all, right? I mean, listen, you've spent your life writing, and there are so many different things that you've written. And quickly, I just want to touch up on them again. We don't want to spend too much time because, of course, the book of the hour was Through Different Eyes. But we have two other plays actually that you've written. One called The Waiting Man, and one called Due Time.
Well, The Waving Man is about an incident. Actually, it came from life. But on the way to driving to work for some time, there was a man waving to other people going by, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought about that so long, and wondered why he was doing that, and what was up with it. And so I've ended up writing a play about it, and a woman psychologist and a man that just comes across him all the time when he's going to work or whatever get into quite a conversation about that, and the woman tries to understand the man, and the man, of course, thinks he's a nut, and so they have to work through that. But the waving man continues to wave.
That is
So that's that
beautiful.
story. And then Due Time is
Mm-hmm.
about my grandmother's issue when she was, and this is out at Living History Farms and the barn, and we had a lot of plays in there that night. And this one was of young Anna being abused by this older woman who she couldn't do anything right. She didn't feed her enough, and Anna went through that. Um, so anyway, that's what's that, and that went well. We had several plays that night in the barn.
Wow. Absolutely incredible. I mean, listen, I know the main book was Through Different Eyes, right? And we're talking about your grandmother's journey. But listen, Barbara, I think the next book that you have to write, you got to talk about your journey because it is so impressive in the things that you've been able to accomplish and able to do. I mean, that is absolutely wonderful, so beautiful. And guys, listen, as we're tying everything up, as we've talked about, we're focusing on her grandmother's specific journey. But what makes it so relatable is all of our families have journeys of their own, right? Everybody has a voice.
Everyone does, yes.
Absolutely. And the one thing that can be taken
It's up
from
to
it.
you to find it.
Absolutely,
It's
right?
up to you to find it and enjoy it, and take it in.
There it is.
Give it a big hug.
Those voices are there. They are waiting to be heard. So take the journey, starting here with Through Different Eyes, An Immigrant's Heroic Journey, 1889 to 1909. Available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble by J. Barbara Alvord. Go out, get the book. We're all spending a lot of time at home lately, so let's take the journey with Barbara that she's constructed with us. Barbara, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for being a guest with
I had
us.
a lot of fun. Thank you. I'm pleased. I'm very pleased.